Today on Locked On Red Wings, the roster is at 22 as Aston-Reese is assigned to Grand Rapids. And will Dahlin's new contract affect Seider's next one?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the daily JAWWJ News Radio podcast. Well, Scotty's a host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And on today's episode, guys, we're going to talk about the fact that Zach Aston-Reese cleared waivers, was sent down, and that was hit. So the Red Wings are currently at 12 forwards. We'll talk about the implications of that. That was one of our three scenarios.
You're love.
What?
You, for starters.
Thank you.
I love when both of us spend like 10 minutes each like explaining our sides, and then it's just the one that we spent 30 seconds on at the beginning, and we were like, oh, this could happen too, but like
it's unlikely.
Well, there's like no like explanation. There's no further explanation needed if you're just going to carry 12, and that looks like that's what's going to happen.
Which is why we're going to continue to talk about it today, because it was the one scenario we didn't talk a lot about. We'll talk about maybe why they're doing it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, do you want to just get right into it? Like, we can talk.
Well, yes, but first I got to tell the people that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. But yeah, as Scotty was saying, Aston-Reese cleared waivers. It's funny, we had a little text exchange. And I was like, well, now we have to find out what's going to happen. And you were adamant that Aston-Reese wasn't going to get waived. And I knew if it was going to happen sometime in the hour. Like, if he's cleared at 2 o'clock, we'll know by 3 o'clock. If we hear something, we'll know. And if we don't hear something, we'll know if he's going to be on the roster or if he'll be sent down to Grand Rapids. And we texted about like 2:20, 2:30. You were like, he's not going to get sent down. He's staying on the team. He's the 13th forward until they need to clear a roster space for somebody else. And I agreed with you for the most part. I was like, I still think it could happen, but I'm starting to believe you're right. And then like 10 minutes later, boom. And I said,
what'd you say? No. What'd you say?
I can't say it.
Oh,
I said, I rubbed your face in it, but then I followed up with, I love you though.
That is true. Yeah. Well, the biggest thing for me was, I was more adamant on the fact that Berger wasn't going to be on the NHL roster than I was Aston-Reese not being on the NHL roster. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
my passion in the conversation yesterday was much more stemmed from, I just don't think there is a legitimate, like, for development purposes, like a real spot for Berger on this NHL roster on opening night. Not as much like, oh, Aston-Reese needs to be the 13th like forward or else this organization sucks. Like that, whatever happens with him. But like, that's more of what my stance was. So when I was thinking about it, in terms of like, oh, like they're not going to send him down, because if they do send him down, then they will call up Berger. And I was so adamant that was absolutely not going to happen. And just rolling with 12 forwards really never legitimately crossed my mind in that conversation, in that text exchange you're referring to. Like, at no point was I like, oh, like, maybe he'll get sent down because they're just going to roll with 12. Like, for me, I got way too tunnel visioned on just like, oh, it's going to be one of those two guys. And it's not, I was just so adamant that it wasn't going to be Berger. So they split the bill, and we were both
kind of right, kind of wrong.
Our possibilities kind of half happened, and now we're sitting at 12 forwards.
Yeah. And I mean, now we're sitting here at 12 forwards and we're going to go, okay, what's going to happen next? Because, here's the reality of the situation, I think. My new theory that I'm going to be wrong about. I think that they're under no rush to fill that 13th forward slot, because to start the season, they have 12 healthy forwards. And so they can take their time figuring out who from Grand Rapids is going to be that player who's going to earn themselves. See, that doesn't even sound right, though, as I'm saying, because earn themselves the opportunity to sit out at an NHL level, right? Like, that doesn't make much sense. But the point being is they're not in any rush to with Grand Rapids being right down the road to fulfill that 13th forward spot. So until there's a pressing need, like a player's underperforming and just needs to sit out and get their head right, or there is an injury, they don't need to address this situation until it needs to be addressed. And I think the other reason is, and I kind of mentioned it as a joke, but I actually think it might be true. I think that they finalized their roster last night because they could, because of the fact that it was a convenience thing. Clearly, they weren't going to recall Berggren now. We know this now, and they were going to assign Aston-Reese. We know this now. And so they were like, okay, well, both these guys are going to go down to Grand Rapids. Let's just finalize our roster before Aston-Reese even clears. So even though Aston-Reese is on the finalized roster, he immediately got sent down. So I think it was partially just like for convenience. And now we're all sitting here wondering what's the deal with 12 forwards, because the other argument people were making is that it's a roster thing. A lot of NHL teams like to carry 22, not 23 players, and the Red Wings carrying 3 goaltenders. That is an extra roster spot taking them to 22. They usually carry 22, not 23 for cap reasons. But I dismissed that last night, and I still don't think it's the case because of the fact that the Red Wings have a ton of cap space still. Not a ton, but enough to carry on Aston-Reese's $750,000 at the NHL level and have it not be an issue. But I think it's just they want to give themselves the extra flexibility for that one extra roster spot, and they're not in any pressure or under any pressure to fill that spot right now, at least for opening night, because they have plenty of time to figure out what they want to do. I think it's literally just Berggren didn't earn a spot. They knew Aston-Reese was just depth. So they're going to figure out when the time comes who's going to be that final roster spot. They just don't feel like they're under pressure to do it. It's a bizarre situation carrying 12 forwards. It is. But I just feel like they know for sure they have 12 NHL forwards, and they are not completely sure who that 13th forward is yet. My hat is in the ring for Austin Czarnik, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah, that is a different conversation. I think, I think this really boils down to, I guess, technically 3 things, but like 2 main points for me is like how we got here. One, and like this is like the half point, like the fairly obvious one, is that all of those guys are healthy right now. So like there's no need to have a 13th forward in fear of like, oh, we're going to ease somebody back in, or oh, we're not confident they can play every night, whatever. So you have 12 healthy forwards. So you don't desperately need that. You also have now Aston-Reese, who has cleared waivers and you can bring up and send down or whatever you have to do. You have Berggren, who's waiver exempt. Like you have options at your disposal to bring up without having to mess with the waiver wire again in the future, at least if something happens like relatively soon. So you have that going for you as well. But my 2 biggest like reasons as to why we're here. One is the emergence of Sprong in the preseason. Like that is very indirectly, or I guess directly, affected this decision, right? Sprong in our summer like preseason stuff, like we were like, oh, bottom 6. You might, if Berger's on the 3rd line, then like Sprong's, could be like a 4th line scoring option, whatever. And he has been like, there's a legitimate argument. He's been your best goal scorer in the preseason. Now it's the preseason. He's not going to be the best goal scorer on the team in the regular season, obviously, but like he has looked fantastic. So he has solidified himself as a 3rd line player, and everyone else in your top 9 is solidified, right? That there is no room for Berger to crack that. And we kind of talked about this yesterday. And the second biggest one is confidence in the 4th line.
Yes.
Clearly, this coaching staff and front office is uber confident in that Costin, Fisher, Veleno 4th line. And they have no regrets about it. There's no second thoughts about it. They clearly are very, very confident in those 3 guys playing together. And that has all led us to here where you already, with Sprong's emergence, you have a solidified top 9. And now.
Breaking news.
Yes.
So we're recording this at 5:51 on Monday evening. And this changes. I don't think it changes, it just reaffirms. Ansar Khan of MLive tweeting out after the Red Wings practice during media availability with Lalonde that Derek Lalonde said they're not calling up a 13th forward. So again, that reaffirms that the Red Wings just feel they don't need one at this time. So all that confusion and hubbubaloo from yesterday Turns out it was over nothing. Red Wings just didn't want one. Added, they don't need it. Said he even is contemplating going 11 forwards tomorrow and 7 defensemen. Confirmed Husso is starting. So I don't know what to make about the fact that he has so little confidence in his forward lines that he only is going to have 3 2/3 lines and then 7D. And maybe that speaks more of the fact that he can't choose a defenseman to sit out, that he thinks they all deserve to play. But like, to not have force, like, who's double shifting? Who's going to double shift with that four? Because you would assume that the player sitting out is going to be on the 4th line. What's happening?
Great question.
What is happening? It's crazy. And like, so it reaffirms what we were saying. The Red Wings, it turned out the reality is Red Wings just feel they don't need a 13th forward, which is completely fair. You have 12 healthy forwards, and like the truth was staring us in the face, and we just didn't want to look at it because we had differing opinions on why they should carry a 13th forward. But now they're talking about only running 11 forwards on Thursday and 7D. That is wild to me. So I don't know if that changes how you're going to finish up that final thought, but that's
not really. Like my point was going to be just like confidence in the 4th line. I guess maybe that like changes. No, not really. Like I don't think that changes my tune really at all. Like, A, he didn't say like we're definitely going to do 11 and 7 for starters, but B, like even if he does, like I don't think that really changes much. Like again, like a lot of it's Sprong and obviously confidence in those 3 guys on the 4th line. And like if there's no way in for anybody else, then there's no way in for anybody else. And if they're all healthy, then like how much do you really need a 13th? The 7 and 11 is crazy to me.
Yeah. We should save that because we were going to talk about the lines from practice.
Yeah.
Anyways, and this will play into that. So let's save that for segment 2. We're going to take a quick break. First, I got to talk to you guys, right, about Game Time. Game Time is the only ticketing app that you guys need to use for complete peace of mind with your purchase of any tickets you want for the upcoming NHL season. Obviously, Red Wings are number 1, but if you have other fan bases as well, fandoms as well, that as well. Wow, as well. See the view from your seat before you buy. I'm flustered, man. So you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All in prices show your total upfront, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. Buy tickets in 2 seconds with just 2 taps. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute tickets. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, concerts, baseball, comedy, theater, and of course, hockey. And with zone deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for an average of 18% in savings. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are now talking about the fact that the Red Wings might be contemplating 11 forwards and 7 defensemen for the season opener in New Jersey. And I guess let me give you my first blush reaction to that. What that screams to me is they still don't know what the ideal lines are. I mean, Lalonde says he doesn't know who's still to place on that top wing with Larkin and DeBrincat. And we've seen a rotation in the preseason of Perron, Raymond, and even Rasmussen on that top line. In practice today, we saw that, and of course, when you reopen X, it's just completely gone. But you saw the lines were Perron, DeBrincat, Larkin, and then it was Comfer, Raymond, and Fabry. I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head. Kopp, Sprong, and Rasmussen. And then, of course, Veleno, Kostin, and Fisher. Did that all off the top of my head. Pretty proud of myself. So, I mean, we saw, again, the jumbling of the forward lines. I still think those are pretty solid forward lines. Of course, my boy Rasmussen back to 3rd line. But he'll excel wherever he's at because he's amazing. I'm all in. But I would prefer Perron being on the off wing on line 2, but I think he'll be fine in the top wing because of what I mentioned yesterday. He still has that physical presence. He's strong on the puck. He's going to do a good job in the corners, getting the puck out, maintaining possession. He excels at that. I think his production might take a slight hit playing on his regular wing, not his off wing where he likes. But I think he'll be just fine. No 13th forward at practice. And then your defensive pairs were an Ansar Khan had it. Obviously, Wollman and Seider, Petrie, Sherratt, Mata goes to spare with Hall being the 7th D-man. I was going to come into this, Scotty, talking about is Hall going to be a healthy scratch to start the season? But now with Lalonde saying we're contemplating having 7 D-man, what that says is I don't know what our lines and pairs are going to look like still after preseason and training camp. And that's fair considering there's a bunch of new bodies and guys who bring a myriad of talents to this NHL roster.
Yeah.
It's still wild to me, but it happens.
I think that maybe there's a very, very real chance that I am over thinking how much I do think that the coaching staff really liked that 4th line in the preseason. But I in my eyes, that comment to me screams more of we have 7. Like that seems more about the blue line than it does the forwards. Like, does that make sense? Like in a weird way, you're only carrying like 12, obviously. And I feel like the 7 D-men that we have laid out, we've talked all summer about like who was going to be the scratch, like who was going to be the 7th D-man, who was going to be the guy that didn't play, who was going to be the scratch on some nights. Like, is it going to be a revolving door? Was it going to be Sherratt sometimes? Was it going to be Oli Mata because his contract is the smallest and like that's it? Like we've gone and had a plethora of conversations surrounding, what to do with that 7th D-man spot now that there's not like a clear, last year was easy. It was just like there was a clear decision and now it's not. I think that might have more to do with that than it even does the forwards in my eyes. Like they're just looking at it and they're like, yeah, I mean, there's not like a clear separation here. I don't, all these guys, especially in the bottom 5, I guess you would say, or at least the bottom 3 would be pretty similar in terms of like caliber. Like, I don't know, man, my head's spinning a million miles an hour. Obviously
Scotty,
that was, this is all off the dome instant reaction, but like I feel like that says more about the blue line than it does the bottom of the forward group.
I completely agree with you. I think you've hit the nail on the head, honestly. Like you said, Lalonde has sung the praises of that, the construction of that 4th line being Kostin, Veleno, and Fisher. So, and you look at the rest of the top 9, the rest of the bottom 6 and the top 6, there's not really a player that stands out as a guy you would have as a healthy scratch to start the season. So I think it's more of, like you said, is he doesn't yet know what the best pairings are chemistry-wise for the defense. And I mean, that's what we talked about. Like you said, all offseason is it's going to be hard to figure out what the best. So I think that first game maybe the first couple games is going to be about, sorting out which defenseman is the odd man out, which stinks in one regard, because I mean, there's always going to be a certain amount of figuring it out even into the season. But to this degree of trying to figure it out is a little like, I wish like you have all training camp and all preseason, you still don't necessarily know what your best option is. A little like, I wouldn't say concerning, but just like, is this a good problem to have? Because it means that all these defensemen are really pushing to be in the lineup, or is it, we don't know what's best. We're still confused ourselves. Like, which is it a good problem or a problem is what I'm trying to express here. So, I mean, we'll find out. It is unorthodox to carry 7 defensemen and 11 forwards going into a game, but it does happen. It happens usually a few times a year, honestly. Yeah. So I mean, it happens. Red Wings continue to little extra unorthodox, but it happens.
A little even more weird, but
it's uncommon, but it does happen. So I'm not like stressing about it, but it's just really interesting. And the Red Wings continue their trend of making really unorthodox plays to start the season.
Yeah,
But he said he's contemplating it, not that he's going to do it.
Correct. Yeah. This could be null, and we just could be of the traditional as well. But
like it's everything we've talked about the last few days. Just immediately we get it out in the universe and the whole thing changes.
Right.
We have to
Yeah,
re-record.
that's kind of how our week has gone.
I can't wait for the season to start so things don't change every 5 minutes like they do in preseason.
Oh, except they will. Because we don't have a 13th forward. And we have 3 goalies. So, like, they will change, actually, like, throughout the season.
Anyway, Scotty, we should take another quick break when we come back. Unless you have any other comments.
No,
We
we pretty much covered everything. I'm very, very fascinated to watch the construction of the roster the first, like, 2 or 3 weeks of the season.
Absolutely with you. We'll take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Moritz Seider and whether or not Rasmus Dahlin's huge extension is going to affect what Seider might make come the end of this season when he is an RFA for the first time in his career. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about FanDuel. Snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, odds, or over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Visit FanDuel.com to learn more. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah, what's up?
Can you read out loud for the class the third bullet point you have there?
Oh, yeah. No, I noticed that earlier, and I meant to bring
Impact
it up. Yeah.
has 2 P's.
I double tapped the P on Impact. It happens.
It does.
Listen, I'll be completely candid with you guys, and maybe I shouldn't. A little peek behind the curtain of my own laziness. A lot of times when it comes to creating the backgrounds, I just like slam the keyboard with my fingers as fast as possible and then hit export.
Wow, that's great. That's great.
I'm a habitual.
I knew if I didn't bring it up, we'd catch heat for it from somebody. So I was just like, you know what? Let's just get out ahead of it. Just call Brian stupid now, and then we can just all move on with our days.
More like call Brian not stupid, but unobservant or like a stupid rush job. That's fair. Okay, we can go because I do this when I text too. I mean, you witness it firsthand. How often I just type, hit send. I have a problem with proofreading. It's one of my many flaws. Yeah, it's one of my many flaws. But hey, look at the use of that semicolon. Ooh.
He goes, ooh.
That's hard. That's hard to use, man.
Yeah,
anyways, let's talk about Moritz Seider. Rasmus Dahlin, the Buffalo Sabres announced today that he signed a max-length 8-year deal, making $11 million a season. For the base salary varies a little bit, but the average $11 million a season for 8 years, beginning next season, 2024-2025 season. And then a no-move clause begins the year after that, and a second year of that extension, and that runs through the rest. There was a small panic. I wouldn't call like a panic, but there was a small section of Red Wings Twitter that was beginning to like, oh my God, this is going to really screw Moritz Seider or the Red Wings on Moritz Seider's next contract because he's going to be looking at that and like talking to his agent, which is Claude Lemieux, and like trying to get Seider $11 million for 8 years. And I guess I wanted to frame it like, do you think this is going to change what Moritz Seider makes on his next contract when this ELC is up at the end of the season? And my answer, just to put it out there in the universe immediately, is no. I don't think it's going to have any impact on what Moritz Seider makes. I really don't. Because Rasmus Dahlin and Moritz Seider are on different spots in their careers.
Oh, that was it. I agree with you. I don't think that this will be... Obviously, anytime someone in your position gets paid, the market is going to shift a little bit. I'm not saying that it's going to have zero impact, but I think the thought that like, oh, if Seider has a really good year, that's like the new bar, I think is a huge reach. I don't view that as having that much of a direct impact on Seider specifically. They're different style of players and they're at different points in their career, as you mentioned. So I think that is a little far-fetched to just think that like that's the new bar for any defense, like young defenseman that gets extended from here on out. Like that's the expectation. I don't think it's going to be that dramatic. But I mean, to say it would have zero is also like, no, maybe I don't know, like a monetary value, like, oh, is it going to increase at 500K? Like, I don't know the extent of the market. We're still a year out, even, who knows, like, what else is going to happen as far as players who are maybe more comparable to Seider and more like younger defensemen getting paid over the next calendar year. But to put it, to summarize, I guess, no, I don't think that this is a move that is going to like, oh, like now Seider has to get paid that much money or he's not going to be here.
Yeah. I mean, this is the third contract Rasmus Dahlin's been under. He's coming off a bridge deal, making $6 million for 3 years. He's older, obviously, than Moritz Seider. Not a ton older, actually, which is surprisingly only 23 years old. It feels like he's been in the league already much longer than that. Well, Moritz Seider's 22. I cannot believe they're only a year apart, and this is his third contract.
Yeah, it's wild.
That's crazy. But that's the different. Rasmus Dahlin came in the league at 18 years old. Seider didn't come in the league until he was.
Dude, do you remember
20.
the height?
Oh yeah, it was crazy, and it took him a little while. But Rasmus Dahlin has eventually lived up to the hype. So this is his third contract, and he's coming off an incredible season where he absolutely exploded and finally became that elite level play driving defenseman, offensive style defenseman. He had 73
He's a quarterback, man.
Yeah.
Quarterback.
73 points in 78 games played, 15 goals, 58 assists. And I'm not saying Seider doesn't have that element to him, but for Rasmus Dahlin, it's much bigger part of his game. Moritz Seider, on the other hand, is much more balanced offensive and defensive defenseman. He plays both sides of the puck very well, while also being an incredibly physical player. They're slightly different players, and he's at a different stage of
Buffalo
his career.
Doesn't believe in defense.
Yeah. Until Moritz Seider proves he can be like a 70-point guy, and I think that Moritz Seider can be a consistent 50-point guy. I don't know about 60 and 70 points. I really don't. But because that's not Moritz Seider's game. While he has a puck play driving offensive element to his game, it's his game isn't scoring goals and, skating the puck through the offensive zone, and that's not the sole part of his game. He plays a much more nuanced, balanced game. So I don't think that you have to worry about Seider scoring 73 points and getting an $11 million contract next year. I do think that he may probably get an $8 million contract and become the highest paid player on the team. Yeah. But I think it's going to be much more in the range of what Jake Sanderson got. And we had this conversation when Jake Sanderson got his extension. It was a max 8-year deal, $8.05 million. I think Seider is still going to get, I'm going to cheat here because on my own poll that I put out, which I'll address, I put $8 to $9 million range and then $9 to $10 million range. I made you guys choose. I think for Seider, it's going to be between 8.5 and 9.5. I think he might slightly edge out Dylan Larkin, but it's not going to be by a lot because that's what you do with guys when they're this young and you sign them to those huge long-term contracts is you give them, that amount of money so that at the end of that contract, when the salary cap is much higher, it's not as much. But Seider doesn't have the resume that Dahlin has yet to earn him that big money. This is only Seider's third season where even though they're only a year apart in age, it's Dahlin's sixth. So there's a huge experience difference here, and they know what they have in Dahlin. They know that he's a superstar. Not that I don't know that Seider can't be a superstar, because I do think out of anyone on this team, he has the superstar potential. But because of the fact that they're just at different points in their career, and plus the fact that Seider's an RFA on top of that, there's a little bit of negotiating leverage to the Red Wings. I just don't see a reality where Seider's going to walk out of this season with $11 million in his contract, max 10 mil. But I even think that's pushing it. I really do think it's made between the $8.5, $9.5 million range. So if you're freaking out about the Dahlin situation, him making $11 million starting next year, I wouldn't. Not unless Seider goes out there and scores 75 points this year.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I agree with conceptually everything you're saying. Again, we still have a lot of time, right? Like I think it's a little bit of like jumping the gun to say like, oh, like this is what like he's probably going to get. Now there's like $1 million range that you gave, so I think like what you said is applicable. But I think that like there's still like a year presumably until like this is going to happen, right? Like there's a legitimate chance we're like a calendar year away from this happening, maybe a little bit less. So I think like there's still a lot of variables that could change. There's a lot more people that can get paid. There's a lot more market shifting that can happen. But right now, I don't think I agree with everything you said. I don't think that this automatically means that he's going to get 10 plus mil. I think he's still in that 8 to 9 range, as of October 10th, 2023.
Well, and there's also the possibility too, because we know that Steve Yzerman doesn't like giving out 8-year deals. We saw that with DeBrincat. He only gave him a 4-year deal. That there is a reality here where he gets a bridge deal. And this is handled more like a Dahlin, where maybe he gets a 4-year, $6.5 million deal, and or a 3-year, $6.5 million deal, takes him as close to UFA as possible. And then he gets the big $11 million contract like Dahlin did. I mean, that's another factor that we didn't really talk about. We talked about it's his third contract, but the fact of the matter is he was going to get a big pay raise after coming off a $6 million contract.
For sure.
So if you pay Seider now, you're going to be paying him substantially less because he's not coming off of a bridge deal where he needs to make more money. He's going to have earned more money.
Right. The bridge would be the first half of the contract.
So that's a possibility too, that you could give him a bridge deal. I think that Seider is going to get the 8-year deal and Raymond might get the bridge deal depending on how Raymond's final year of his ELC goes.
Yeah, it's a huge year for Raymond.
Yeah. But you pay your stars and you lock up your stars long term. And I think that's what
he's also a lot younger, which is wild because they're not that old, but he's pretty comfortably younger than Larkin and DeBrincat.
I could have sworn Dahlin was 25, 26, and he's only 23. It's like,
right. I was talking about Seider, but same premise. In terms of locking, not wanting to give DeBrincat that really long contract. Seider's younger. He did do it with Larkin. It is possible.
Yeah. Let's real quick. I'll go over the poll results because I asked you guys what you guys thought. And I asked, now that Dahlin has signed big money, do you think this affects how much Seider will make on his extension? 64% of you, 159 votes, 64% of the 159 voted yes, that it will affect what Seider is going to make on his next extension. Again, I already stated I don't think so because I think that's a different world.
I think that effect is just very vague, dog. I think it will affect it. I don't think he's going to get paid 10 mil, but I think it will affect it at least a little bit. You know what I mean? I think that's just a very vague and kind of open-ended question. So
well, maybe this is more to the point for you, Scotty.
The next one is, I agree.
The second of the two poll questions was, what range do you think Seider's next contract will be dollar-wise? 90 votes on this one. 43%, which was the majority, said $8 to $9 million, which is why I said I was cheating because I said 8.5 to 9.5. I should have been fair and put that on there. But I think that makes sense because the next highest was 36% for 9 to 10. So if you want to split the difference, most people think 8.5 to 9.5 is probably the reality. Because I think if you split that even further, the people who think less than 8.5 and more than 9.5 is probably less than the group that think between 9.5 or 8.5 and 9.5. Only 14% of you think less than $8 million, which is possible. So I won't crap on it because it's possible if he signs a bridge deal, which is the next question. The term, how long? 5% of 84 votes said 3 years or fewer, which is crazy to me. I will be shocked if it's 3 years or fewer for even a bridge deal. 4 to 5 years is 25%, which is the second highest. 6 to 7 years was the 17%. And then an 8-year max got the best result, which is 53%.
I agree with that. It's either going to be the bridge, which is the the second shortest, or it's going to be max, and they're just going to go 8.
So if you want to put all these together, it looks like the bulk majority of you think he'll get an 8-year deal for between $8 to $9 million, which I think is probably right, given especially Jake Sanderson, I think is a better comp than Rasmus Dahlin.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Any final thoughts?
What are the Jets doing? We don't have to go down that.
Winnipeg Jets. I thought you were talking about the New York Jets. I was like, it's a good question. They're going all in. That's what they're doing.
Hey, respect.
I think they got a great
big ups.
I think they got a great $sign number on Hellebuck, but I think giving a 7-year deal to a guy who's going to be 31 by the time that extension kicks in is a big gamble. A guy who had a career year at age 30. You're really gambling on that being the new norm at age 30 and him maintaining that. I mean, I guess what they're doing is what the Tigers did with Miguel Cabrera, where you're paying him big money for when they're still good and hoping to win a cup in that window. And then you're saying, well, by the time these guys are old and they're killing us, we'll be in rebuild anyways.
Yep.
I think it's a big gamble, but I think if you're the Winnipeg Jets, I wouldn't say it's the right decision, but like it was either that or rebuild.
That or tear it down, baby.
And if you're the general manager, you go, well, if I commit to rebuilding, it could cost me my job. So he went the let's go all in route.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see how it plays out for him.
So we'll be back tomorrow. We have a little I don't know if crossover is the right word. We have a guest planned for coming on. We should have Andrew Rinaldi on to preview the Grand Rapids Griffins season, especially now that they're loaded with talent. And
loaded roster for him.
Loaded roster. So we'll talk about that and preview the Grand Rapids Griffins season tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. Did you say we ball? You did, right?
We ball.
Just for posterity.
I didn't. That was me saying.
Oh, okay. Good. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.